It makes a lot of sense to make comparisons between Universal Studios Hollywood and the Disneyland Resort, and today I'm going to compare rides and lands that are similar between the two resorts and see which is better. The reason I'm comparing them in this format is because doing it in a different format would just be unfair because of how much bigger the Disneyland Resort is. I also want to make note of a few comparisons I thought about doing but ended up deciding against. Number one would be City Walk versus Downtown Disney. These are very similar and located outside of their respective parks. I think it just ultimately depends on what stores you like going into and what interests you in general. Honestly, for now, I think I would have to say City Walk just because of that restaurant we ate at, but otherwise, I don't think there's a whole lot of comparison here. It's just stores, basically. Another comparison I was going to do was Transformers versus Spider-Man. I would totally have done this if I'd been able to ride Transformers. It unfortunately wasn't open the day of our visit, as I mentioned in my Universal Studios Hollywood review, which you should check out, by the way, if you haven't seen it. But regardless, I think Transformers would have been the winner here, because Spider-Man's just okay at best. But now, getting into the real comparisons, let's start with the indoor roller coasters, Revenge of the Mummy versus Space Mountain. It should go without saying that these coasters, despite being both indoors, are very different from one another. Space Mountain is a lot more family friendly all the way around, from the layout itself and it not really featuring a main drop, to the theme being lighter. It's a more family friendly experience as you would expect at a Disney park. For this comparison, I'm going to use Hyperspace Mountain and not the normal Space Mountain to go up against Revenge of the Mummy. I do think the Hyperspace Mountain overlay for just a little bit of time each year is the best way to do that, but I also do think it makes the ride more fun. Obviously, you're going the same speed as normal Space Mountain, but with all the screens, the lasers, and the music, it feels a lot faster, which is not a problem with me. Even with that, it is nowhere near as thrilling as Revenge of the Mummy, and I also think Mummy has better theming. That first part of the ride has some very nice sets. Once the actual thrilling part gets going though, it's a lot of fun. You got a punchy launch, a great ejector airtime moment, a backwards section, all in the dark. Is it a dark theme? Yes. Is it more fun than Space Mountain? Well, that's subjective, but for the purpose of this video, I do think I have more fun on Revenge of the Mummy because I like more thrilling attractions. So with that, Universal is going to earn the first point. Let's stick with coasters just on a much smaller scale. Flight of the Hippogriff versus Chip 'n Dale's Gadget Coaster. Both of these coasters serve the kids coaster niche at their respective resorts, and they're both very good kids coasters. Flight of the Hippogriff is bigger, and it actually has a little bit of force to it. Along with that, you get a neat view of Hagrid's hut and the Hogwarts castle. It's also very smooth, and for that matter, so is Chip 'n Dale's Gadget Coaster. It's just a little bit smaller. It's a Vekoma Jr. coaster. The theming on Gadget Coaster is cute, and I like the red track. And it ties in perfectly with Toontown, and I think it's great in the spot where it is. But ultimately, I think I prefer Flight of the Hippogriff for similar reasons to Revenge of the Mummy. While Hippogriff isn't thrilling per se, it does have a little more bite to it. So with that, Universal Studios has earned another point. With that out of the way, here is the toughest comparison, and that would be the two boat rides, Jurassic World the Ride and Pirates of the Caribbean. These are both some of the best boat rides in the entire world. Let's start with some of the major differences, i.e. the length. Jurassic World isn't short, but in comparison to Pirates of the Caribbean, it's about half the length of the latter attraction. That being said, Pirates 2 drops aren't as good as Jurassic World's final plunge. The ones on Pirates are just okay, but they're more like ramps than drops, to be honest. In contrast, the final plunge on Jurassic World is awesome. It's taken at a pretty steep angle, and while you probably won't get airtime, you will get a stomach-dropping sensation. It's one of my favorite drops that I've experienced, and while on the topic, the scene leading up to that drop is better than anything Pirates has to offer in my opinion. The Indominus Rex animatronic is freaking amazing, and the T-Rex is pretty neat too. I wish this stretch of the ride was longer because it's so cool. And while Pirates has a lot of big set pieces, I don't think they have anything that quite compares to this. That being said, there is a unique feeling you get when you ride Pirates of the Caribbean, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. Maybe it's walking into the building and feeling the temperature drop and smelling the water, I really don't know. But Pirates of the Caribbean is a special experience. Despite all the praise I gave Jurassic World, I think I'm going to give the edge to Pirates of the Caribbean because this ride has a lot going for it as well. You have those big set pieces, you have a couple of okay drops, and an amazing amount of animatronics. Seriously, every scene is jam-packed with stuff to see, and you will notice new things on every single ride. Moving on to some feedier type attractions, Kung Fu Panda versus PhilharMagic is going to be our next comparison. This is an interesting one because neither of these rides are really that noteworthy, but they're not bad either. Starting with the former, it's not a crazy intense simulator as you don't even have a restraint, but at least the seats do move a little bit and have some vibration, which helps. Credit where credit is due though, I was impressed with the projection mapping at the end because I completely forgot that it was in the attraction at all. That was definitely the most interesting part, and it made it stand out a little more. As for Mickey's PhilharMagic, this is a pretty decent show. Donald has to go find the sorcerer's hat, and we're taken through scenes from a bunch of different Disney movies, i.e. Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, and so many more. On another note, I feel bad for Donald because he's always the one getting beat up. I don't know why that is the case. In the end, we're treated to a nice little musical number, but I think I prefer PhilharMagic. Maybe it's just because I've watched more of the Disney movies and I've only seen Kung Fu Panda once or twice. I don't know. PhilharMagic, outside of the projection mapping, does have a lot more to offer, I think. The way they blended the different films was a pretty creative idea. It's not anything crazy, but it's an enjoyable experience if you're at Disney's California Adventure. Our final ride comparison is going to be Secret Life of Pets versus Little Mermaid. I know these rides aren't terribly similar, but for some reason I couldn't find another ride that matched up as well with Secret Life of Pets. And right off the bat, I'm going to reveal my winner, and that's Secret Life of Pets Off the Leash. I think this is a really cute dark ride and a great addition of this park. They desperately needed a physical sets-based dark ride, especially in the upper lot, and thankfully Universal got them one, and it's a good one. There's a lot to look at on this attraction. Now, that's not to say I don't enjoy Little Mermaid. I don't love the Little Mermaid film, but I think the ride did a good job at telling the story. The effect when you're going under the water is pretty cool. Other than that, I would say there are two highlights in the ride. Number one would be the under the sea scene because there's just so much to look at and so much movement. And number two is that Ursula animatronic, which I think flies under the radar as one of Disney's better animatronics. So, as I said, I do enjoy this ride, but I just don't think it has what it takes to knock off Secret Life of Pets. Alright, first of two land comparisons. Number one, Hogwarts versus Galaxy's Edge. Both of these lands are excellent and super impressive. In the case of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, the buildings look great, but it's just a lead up to the Hogwarts castle, which is the true best part of the land. That castle is terrific. And it's also where you find the best ride in the land, Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey, the other ride being the aforementioned Flight of the Hippogriff. Universal really did a spectacular job with this land, especially when you keep in mind it came well before Galaxy's Edge. That being said, it was going to be really tough to knock off Galaxy's Edge, and I think Hogwarts falls a little bit short for a few reasons. Firstly, I think the food offerings are better at Galaxy's Edge. Experiences like Oga's Cantina, Docking Bay 7, and Ronto Roasters put that land over the top. Don't get me wrong, I thoroughly enjoyed my meal at Three Broomsticks, but it just doesn't quite stack up to some of the best food Disney has to offer. Secondly, and probably more importantly, the rides at Galaxy's Edge are better. For a number 2 attraction, Smuggler's Run blows Flight of the Hippogriff out of the water and then some. And then comparing Forbidden Journey and Rise to Resistance is pretty much unmatched. Though I do understand it came much later. So overall, I think Galaxy's Edge has, well, the edge. There's just a little bit more to offer and the rides are a little bit better. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy my time at the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. I think Universal did an outstanding job with that land as well. Our final comparison is between two more lands, Super Nintendo World and Toontown. And it's the newly reopened Toontown at that. Let's go back to Toontown after we talk about Super Nintendo World. This land is also brand new. That is brand new for the Hollywood location. It's at the Universal Studios Japan location and will be coming to Epic Universe when that park opens. Super Nintendo World is very neat, and I imagine I would appreciate it a lot more if I was a video game guy, but I'm not really a video game guy, so I don't understand all of the references, but I can still appreciate how well done this land is. It's sensory overload with all the sights and sounds, and it is kinda nice when you leave the land from that perspective, but when you're in it, there's so many details to appreciate. At the Hollywood location, there's only one ride, and that would be Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge. This is a unique ride, and one you need to experience for yourself instead of watching a POV. The ride is about in the middle of the pack for Universal Studios Hollywood's lineup. Now, if you look at the land as a whole, it is pretty small, and that makes sense given the space limitations Universal Studios Hollywood has. With that, I imagine it could get really congested when the park is busy, so do be aware of that. Getting back to Toontown, I think the refurbishment Disney did on this land worked out beautifully. They kept the rides from before, i.e. Chip 'n Dale's Gadget Coaster and Roger Rabbit, but they also added a lot more interactive elements. And with some more grassy areas, this land feels a lot more open, which is a nice contrast to the nearby Fantasyland, which always feels tight. So they had the aesthetic improvements and the playground type attractions, but ultimately the best addition was Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. The pre-show is one of my favorites, but the ride itself is also one of my favorites. And I think it blows Bowser's out of the water in that department. So overall, when comparing lands, Disney gets the edge once again, and this is our final comparison, bringing us to a final score of Universal 3, Disney 4. Actually check that, most of these comparisons were so close. And I've been going back and forth on a couple of them, especially that Jurassic World Pirates comparison, but I'd love to hear what you guys think of these comparisons in the comment section below. Do you agree or disagree? And with that, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.